powerful don't have to worry about the Army. They don't seem to worry much about the war either. Millions of dollars in American aid have helped make Vientiane a swinging town.
You'll be waiting to make it right. You know you make it right.
Usually, only those without money or political connections end up in the Army. They are poorly paid and usually poorly led. They have little motivation. Many units have become expert at avoiding confrontations with the enemy. The main military factor in staving off the collapse of what is left of Laos is a massive bombing campaign. It involves Navy and Air Force jets, including B-52s, as well as the U.S.-supported Royal Lao Air Force. Most of the strikes in Laos are directed by American Air Force officers called FACs, or Forward Air Controllers. Accompanied by a Laotian observer, they cruise over enemy territory in a light plane, armed only with smoke rockets. Their task is to locate and mark the targets for the bombers. It's probably the most dangerous job in Laos. No one in Washington or Vientiane will say just how many bombs are being dropped or exactly where. But the facts say civilian targets are avoided.
We're reasonably sure that 100% of it's on military targets. We have a system of assurances. We carry a Laotian to talk to Laotians that don't speak English, and they verify our targets. There are certain places that are just obviously unfriendly, and any of the targets, trucks, boats, supplies that we find are military targets. And such targets where civilians may live, like villages or hooches somewhere, we stay strictly away from these.
Well, the North Vietnamese are pretty smart people. Knowing you're trying to avoid civilian targets, they concentrate their supply effort in a civilian-type area. What happens then?
Okay, well, of course, they've got that one system, and they use it all the time. They put supplies in villages, and we can't hit it. And, of course, the Laotians fly the Laotian airplanes, and there are occasions where if they deem the target is important enough, then Laotians, strictly Laotians with Americans, no American involvement whatsoever, hit targets that they consider to be of vital importance.
The Royal Lao Air Force is an American-created byproduct of the secret war. It's trained, equipped, and advised by Americans. And in a country where fighting spirit is hard to find, the Air Force has become an elite force. The pride of the Air Force are these fighter-bomber pilots. Actually, their fighter bombers are T-28s, originally built as trainers during the Korean War. But they are rugged, easy to maintain, and carry a surprisingly large load of bombs, rockets, and napalm. With 40 T-28s, the Lao Air Force flies up to 4,000 missions a month. The pilots quickly become veterans. They are paid about $55 a month, plus a bonus of $1.60 per combat mission. By any standard, their losses have been heavy. The sons of 2 Laotian cabinet ministers are among the pilots who have been killed. This year's enemy offensive has put new strains on the Air Force. There are more missions and more enemy anti-aircraft guns. For the pilots we flew with recently, it was the 5th mission of the day. Except for a short lunch break, they had already spent 7 hours in their cockpits.
One of the things the ICC would like to investigate is Air America. It wrote to Prime Minister Savanafuma 2 years ago asking permission to do so, but has never gotten a reply. In the meantime, the ICC has gotten so hard up for cash that it's leased one of its helicopters to Air America. And Air America needs all of them it can get for its battlefield support activities of the anti-communist forces in Laos. Neutrality in Laos makes for some weird plot turns. When the Canadian delegate suggested an investigation of the Ho Chi Minh Trail, the Polish delegate said, everybody knows there's a Ho Chi Minh Trail. Why should we bother investigating it? And so it goes in Laos. The job of this American colonel is to keep the neutralist troops supplied, functioning, and most important, fighting. That's the same job our military advisors have in Vietnam. But here, for the sake of protocol, they are called military attachés of the American embassy.
The Commission has been doing, is always anxious to do whatever it can to, but it has its limitations. Thank you.
A spectacular example of its limitations is the daily slugging match of artillery along the plain of Jars between the guns of the communist North Vietnamese and the Laotians. This pile of artillery shell canisters represents the output of a single howitzer battery observing 2 weeks of Laotian-style neutrality.
A day might come when we might be able to make a more effective contribution to the maintenance of peace and sovereignty and integrity, maintenance of peace in this part of the world.
You're right on target, right on target.
From an altitude of about 2,000 feet. Like a cache of arms or some kind of munitions. You can tell by the secondary explosions and all the smoke coming up through the jungles. You can see the napalm hit and explode in those trees.
Of preserving the unity, neutrality, sovereignty, and independence of this country. And we have to take solace from what Milton said, they also serve who only wait and watch.
This is a wound of entrance, where the bullet went in the leg. The wound of entrance is always small, and this is the wound of exit in the thigh.
So you will agree that this is not a very healthy or a satisfactory state of affairs, and I, as Secretary General for this Commission, have many anxious moments on this account.
Despite the anxious moments of an entire world, the battle for Asia, from Vietnam seen here to Laos and more recently to Thailand, gets nothing but bigger. Its reality is hidden behind words, myths, and hopes. All sides fighting in Asia are signatories to various treaties and peace agreements prohibiting war. All sides insist they want peace. Perhaps that's why they're fighting so hard. Technically speaking, the war is illegal. Hostilities are technically prevented by the International Control Commission. The United Nations is also supposed to peacefully resolve differences. Each country loudly proclaims its desire for neutrality, yet a decade of aggression has violated everyone's neutrality and freedom. Repugnant as it is, force has been the sole reality in Asia. And the only really valid question seems to be this: are we, the United States, willing or able to fight communist aggression to a standstill on the mainland of Asia? One of the gunners in this armored column appears to have answered the question. He said, "We're going to make these damn people free whether they like it or not." Ted Yates, NBC News, reporting. When the communists overrun these villages, they like nothing better than to add a U.S. plane to their war trophies. Landing facilities at the guerrilla camps in northern Laos aren't much. They are so bad, in fact, that a new kind of aircraft called STOL, for short takeoff or landing, have to be used. This turboprop creation is a Pilatus Porter. It will lug 2 people and a ton payload over the mountains at 174 miles an hour, land in 150 feet, and take off in 300. With a 35-mile headwind, it gets off in 20 feet. And like the unconventional Pilatus Porter, the war in Laos has developed a new breed of frontline American advisor. Jack Williamson here is the example. Although a civilian, his main job is to keep the Mayo able to fight the communists. To do this, he spends much of his time behind enemy lines, is shot at often, has contracted malaria, hepatitis, and dengue fever. He's also learned to live with the Mayos, speak their language, and earn their loyalty. So effective is his work, the communists have placed a $25,000 reward on his life. Williamson's only fear, however, is that the United States will grow weary of the war and abandon our Mayo allies to the communist invaders. Here he asks the guerrillas why they fight.
I asked him, why don't they like the communists? He says because, one, when the communists come, they force the men to be bearers for the Vietnamese soldiers. They must carry their rice, they must carry their ammunition. They don't like this. Second, they take all their women, and their women are passed among the soldiers, the Vietnamese soldiers, and they don't like this. And two, they take their children and send them to school, and they never see them again, and they don't like this. And there's a lot of other things that kept going on, but this is basically, they don't like the Vietnamese coming in and taking over. Totally committed. And since they made this commitment, they'll be totally annihilated if the help isn't given. There's no question about it. The Vietnamese is to completely annihilate these people, because it's the only real resistance they've met out here as far as this country is concerned.
In Laos, the Mayo guerrillas are doing to the communists what the Viet Cong are doing to us in Vietnam. Their hit-and-run ambush tactics against invading Vietnamese units in Laos are not only militarily effective, but have forced the so-called communist liberators into the embarrassing position of fighting a counterinsurgency war. But the war has driven the Mayos from their farms, and they are hungry. So the biggest part of Jack Williamson's job and U.S. aid is just to keep them eating. The rice is from Thailand, the coolies are Chinese, the money for it all comes from America, and the job is huge. To keep just 130,000 tribesmen fed and fighting takes over 20,000 tons of rice a year, plus wheat, corn, and oil. All this cost the United States over $5.5 million. These coolies manhandle 50 tons of rice a day. What they are doing is rebagging rice into 80-pound loads for airdrops. Each bag is double strength and hand-stitched shut, so it's not as apt to burst on impact from the airdrop. All in all, about 250,000 Laotians have been driven from their homes by the war, about 10% of the total population, and we're helping to feed most of them too. But the Mayo Rice Lift is our biggest single operation. From this warehouse in Vientiane, the bags are trucked to the airport and loaded on Air America transport planes. 2 years ago, Air America rice planes had the skies over Laos pretty much to themselves.
Lima 36, Jolly Green 56. Calling Jolly Green 56, say again.
This is Hotel 22. I don't think there's anyone up on the radio at 36.
Today, the radio channels are full of American voices involved in our air war against North Vietnam and communist supply routes in the South. But this mission is to drop rice, not bombs. The target is the nameless Mayo camp, where Jack Williamson has learned the rice supply is exhausted.
36, Jolly Green 56.
750 is Carberry inbound, going to Tower. We'll have 1,200 pounds on board.
The problem now is whether or not the pilots can find the camp. The solution seems to be to bank through the clouds for a closer look, and in the process, avoid hitting a mountain or enemy anti-aircraft fire. It's all rather risky in a lumbering World War II transport loaded down with 4.5 tons of rice. Through the broken monsoon storms, somehow the pilots get their bearings and grope their way toward the drop zone. In the rear of the plane, the cargo handlers have donned their wind masks. These men are called kickers because they literally kick the cargo out. The sound of the engine brings everybody, even the pigs, scampering to the drop zone. This plane is the difference between life and death to everyone, pigs included. Its arrival means more to these people than Christmas. The pilots rely on Kentucky windage for aiming the rice drop. When they ring the bell, it means push, and out goes the first 18 bags of rice, the most basic weapon in the old and forgotten war in Laos. Air America pilots have become expert in this kind of sharpshooting. From 1,000 feet, they can generally put 90% of the bags into an area the size of a tennis court. The plane drops 108 sacks. This amounts to a 10-day supply for the 3 companies of guerrilla troops who hold this outpost and their families. Because of bad weather, this drop was nearly a week late. The U.S. aid program in Laos is not perfect, But it has come a long way from the early days when much of our money went to finance the import of Scotch whiskey and luxury automobiles for the politicians and generals back in the capital. Neutral Laos has a more formal war. These young Royal Lao Air Force pilots are part of it. After a day of combat missions, many supplementing American airstrikes on communist supply routes in Laos, they relax a bit. Their pay is $12 a month. There is no flight pay, and their tour of duty is for the duration of a war that has no end in sight. Their support is all from the United States Air Force, but like the rest of our military aid in Laos, it is given discreetly. The legitimate government of Laos has asked our help, thus our participation in the war is legal. But the pretense of Laotian neutrality is the price Prime Minister Savanaphouma extracts from us in exchange for letting us help fight his war in Laos, as well as letting us use Laos to help fight our war in Vietnam. The masquerade of neutrality is based on Savanaphuma's reluctance to be labeled an American puppet, and his hope that genuine neutrality may come to Laos when the armed communists in his country have been forcefully driven out. Whatever may or may not happen in Laos, today and for the last 12 years, it's the same long war.
Hello, Yates. Do you read 976?
This is Yates. The Royal Lao Air Force has 24 of these C-28 fighter bombers in action. When the weather permits, they fly 7 days a week, supporting ground troops and shooting up North Vietnamese supply lines into South Vietnam along the Ho Chi Minh and Sihanouk trails, both of which run through Laos. Target. That's the impersonal way of saying we're looking for someone to kill or something to destroy. Trucks, oil depots, rice stores, bridges, anything useful to the enemy fighting in South Vietnam. We are flying towards the junction of the Ho Chi Minh and Sihanouk Trail in southern Laos. To our front is Cambodia, to our left, Vietnam. We are armed with 750-pound bombs, rockets, napalm, and 50 caliber machine guns. Quite a load for a Korean War vintage training plane. Much of the pilot training here is strictly on the job. These pilots range in age from 19 to 34. Many have been flying combat missions like this for 6 years. They go to war every morning as routinely as an American man goes to his office. About 8,000 feet below us is the famous Ho Chi Minh Trail. From here it doesn't look like much, but in fact it's quite an engineering feat to hack a road through these mountainous jungles. It still is one of the principal supply routes of the North Vietnamese into South Vietnam. From here it's a small red ribbon winding down these valleys. The reason we're not flying lower and closer is because of anti-aircraft positions defending the road. If you look closely, you can see where the trail has been bombed. See some bomb craters. The trail has been mostly hand-built, and you can see by the enormous cuts that have been made in the face of these cliffs the tremendous amount of work that's gone on here in 2 years. The reason the foliage on each side of the trail looks brown and dead is because it's been defoliated to make the target clear for the T-28 pilots.
Meanwhile, back in the capital of Laos, the elaborate charade of maintaining neutrality is acted out. The plane belongs to the CIC, Commission Internationale du Contrôle. In English, the International Control Commission, or ICC. Gathered to see it off to Saigon in Cambodia with its cargo of vacationers and mail are members of its 3 delegations, Indians, Canadians, and Poles. Its budget in Laos is $2.2 million annually. Its job is to see to it no one violates Laos's neutrality. Since the ICC can only investigate breaches of neutrality at someone's request and by mutual agreement of the delegation, and since this seldom happens, it devotes itself to trivia. It is also going broke. China and North Vietnam quit paying their agreed-to shares back in 1963. So some of its facilities look a bit shabby. The Indians use this building beside the Mekong River. The Poles live outside town, where several of them have become expert orchid growers. The Indians, accustomed to the heat, are more athletic. They are also intensely proud of their postal service, boasting that a letter addressed to APO 56 New Delhi gets to Laos quicker than by any other means. The problem is there's seldom any official mail about the war they are supposed to control. So all the efficiency merely ensures record delivery of personal mail. They have their own wireless network, too. On the circuit are its delegations in Hanoi and Saigon, who are also responsible for maintaining peace in Southeast Asia. The wireless was installed so the Commission could react promptly and effectively in case of emergency, such as any outright violations of neutrality of Laos by the Vietnamese, Americans, or anyone else. Most of the Commission's paperwork involves its unpaid bills. But on the few recent occasions that the Commission, with the Poles always abstaining, have actually made investigations, the reports have run up to 700 pages. They are sent to the co-chairman of the Geneva Agreement, Britain and the Soviet Union, and that's the last of them. Besides its own airline, which sells tickets to anyone to help pay for the gas, the ICC has its own inspection helicopters, furnished by the United States, which take about 30% of the Commission's annual budget, even though they don't inspect anything. Once, several years ago, the ICC tried to stop a communist offensive by helicoptering an observer team into its path. The communists kept right on coming, and the ICC barely got out with their lives. Since then, they stay parked. Impotent it is, but the ICC has many dedicated people who would like to do their job. Residing at this comfortable Vientiane mansion is the Indian chairman of the ICC. But his efforts are frustrated by rules of procedure, as well as having all meaningful activities of the ICC boycotted by the communist-aligned Polish delegation. His name is Girdhari Lalpuri, career diplomat. With him, his daughter.
The International Commission for Supervision and Control, which, as you know, consists of Canada, India, and Poland, with India as the chairman of the Commission, supervises that, as laid down under the protocol, no foreign troops, foreign instructors, foreign equipment, military equipment comes into this country. That no signatory to the agreement violates the agreement by